All right, so I am now joined by total stranger Paul Prescod. Paul, I think at this point, everybody watching the Jacobin show knows that you are running for a state Senate seat in Pennsylvania's 8th District. Among other reasons, that is why you're no longer a regular on the show. But I did want to have you on the show to talk about some of the specifics of your campaign because I think it's a really interesting one. There's a lot going on, and because it's a state level race, I think we aren't really hearing as much about it in the media as we would for, something like a national Senate seat. So, just to quickly cover the basics of your campaign, you are up against an incumbent who has held the seat for, I think, over 20 years. And what I wanted to focus on is over the last few years, I think on the left, we've really seen quite a few progressive challengers take on long term incumbents, right? Incumbents who are, a little more centrist, a little more moderate, and that's been met with varying degrees of success. Now, for your campaign, I think what's interesting is a lot of the progressive challengers we've seen in the past have really started out with the backing of kind of traditional progressive groups like the Justice Democrats or the Working Families Party or, Our Revolution or DSA. And just to be clear, you have also gotten some of those endorsements along the way. But what's really unique about your campaign is you began by seeking out labor endorsements. And even beyond that, several of the unions that you brought on board early on were blue collar unions. And I think that that's actually kind of unusual for, a progressive challenger, at least the progressive challengers that we've seen in the last couple of years. So I just wanted to start by asking, why did you choose to go about it this way? And how did you make it happen? Like, I don't think you just showed up to, the door of the Teamsters and you were like, I'm Labor Paul, endorse me. How did it all go down?
Yeah, well, first, thanks for having me on. It's really great to be back home and doing this again. Yeah, well, there's many places I can start. Yeah, unfortunately, the Teamsters were not watching the Jacobin show. They didn't know I was Labor Paul. Shame on them. Uh, but yeah, I mean, I guess I'll start by saying, in a sense, it was like 10 years in the making. Just because, and what feels good about this campaign, I mean, politics is not about feeling good, but I think what feels good and effective about this campaign is it really does feel like an organic outgrowth of the work I've already been doing for years, in some ways that our DSA chapter has been doing work for years, um, with this close partnership with labor. So, most of my life engaging politically, I kind of marked the starting date back to 2009, 2010, when I supported a local strike at the university I was going to. I've been heavily involved in labor and building these relationships. And that kind of definitely accelerated these last 4 or 5 years for different reasons. Part of it was engagement with DSA. Part of it was certain flashpoints, like COVID-19. I think there was a big need around workplace health and safety and an uptick in just activity around that. Of course, the Postal Service attacks during the 2020 presidential election. And actually, in all seriousness, the work we had done around defending against those attacks brought us with a close relationship with the local American Postal Workers Union, which is one of the endorsing locals. So it really has just come from, like you said, it wasn't showing up in a room one day and making a great speech. I don't think I'm that effective as a speaker. It really was this work and these relationships over the years. And also say this, as people might already know, often, labor will just back the incumbent in
Mhm.
races like this. And there's, I think, many reasons for these. Some of these reasons are understandable, if frustrating at the same time. And I'm not
Yeah.
defending it all the time. But, oftentimes with these Democrats, when it's all said and done, you look at their voting record, it's pretty good when it comes to labor. And, the fear is always, well, if we back the wrong person, if this incumbent wins, how will they retaliate against
Right.
us? And you can imagine these egomaniac elected officials, most of them, that's a real thing. So often they don't want to take that risk. So it's really heartening to see that they're not doing that in this race. And I also say this, I mean, I think there's always some strokes of luck in any campaign. And I would say this is a combination of luck and political skill, but, there was some good timing, in some
Mhm.
of major unions like the Teamsters, District Council 33, which is the second largest union in Philly, representing blue collar city workers like sanitation workers that have endorsed me. they went through recent leadership changes in the last few years. And these were leaders that I had developed a close relationship with before they ran for office. And so now in office, they know I'm not just someone coming to them at the last minute. They know what I stand for. And these are people who are just more open to taking a little bit of a chance. And like, I really can't tell you if the old guard would have been in power in these unions, would they have backed me? And then what that helped to do is establish credibility early. And I think it's kind of like a train that picks up momentum. And the more they see early on you have these backing, the more safe it feels for other unions to do so. So I think, again, you could call it luck, but it was also, I think, just, again, the relationship building over years that kind of set the stage early and I think allowed for
Right.
these other endorsements and things to come in. But, again, it really could not have happened without, again, I think a decade of work beforehand of just showing that, I am serious about labor. No one can question that, just given the work over the years. And again, not just through Jacobin, but, through supporting labor like on the ground.
Right. So you garnered a few of these union endorsements very early on, but we're a couple months into your campaign. Your primary is coming up on May 17th, so you basically got a month left. So what has labor's involvement in your campaign looked like so far? I assume they're, throwing some money your way. Is there anything else that the unions are doing?
Yeah, so financial contributions, and hitting doors for us. Although
Yeah.
I'll be honest, and I think I should be honest just for people to get a real inside look. The challenge is, for unions, they of course their main priority is not electoral campaigns. They're
Right.
dealing with their own membership issues. So the challenge is turning these endorsements into like getting members to canvass a lot because honestly, they have a lot of other stuff going on. I think for most unions and most people in general, we don't start paying attention to elections until, I don't know, a month, 2 months out, realistically. So
Hmm.
obviously, when you're in the campaign like me, I'm thinking about December is feeling late in the game, but it's really not for most regular people and even unions. So, that's a challenge, just that like unions have other priorities besides electoral politics, their own members. So, it's been a challenge so far translating some of that support into knocking doors. But as it's getting closer, that's picking up.
Hmm.
People may know we first had to get on the ballot. So we had to get a certain amount of signatures to get on the ballot. And we had Teamsters who were able to get paid time off to help us do that. Some unions, like AFSCME District Council 33 and 47, as city workers, part of the city charter, actually bans them from coordinating with the campaign.
Hmm.
So they are conducting their own independent canvasses for us for their slate of candidates, which includes me. And also, I think the word of mouth really helps too. We've had a lot of cool experiences with canvassing. We'll knock on the door of a union member and they can see on their flyer, they're like, oh, well, if my union endorsed you, like I'm going to back you. So that's
Right.
effective. We're planning for election day, having union members covering the polling places, even simple stuff like even the bare minimum of sending out a mailer to your members recommending who they vote for actually goes a long way. Again,
Yeah.
most ordinary people might wake up on election day and look at the mailer and be like, okay, that's who I'm going to take my cue from.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's a variety of levels of support but also, I think it helps connecting with people just on the doors to say, because honestly, most working people still probably don't know what DSA is, or even Working Families Party or Sunrise Movement. But it does help to say, like, hey, the Postal Workers Union endorsed me. I think that connects in a way that it's hard to with other groups that just aren't as well known by people.
Yeah. I want to ask you now about the money in the race, right? Because we had alluded to kind of some of these like union donations a little bit, but I want to make it clear that it sounds like your campaign is, you've got a little bit of the union donations, but your campaign is really powered mostly by small donations, right? Like you're not taking money from any corporations or billionaires or, super PACs. But I do get the sense that there is a lot of big money in the race. I mean, obviously, you're in Philadelphia. There are a lot of wealthy people there. I know that there are quite a few charter school PACs, which I don't think are supporting you. You, Labor Paul, a public school teacher, I'm sorry to say, like, I have a feeling you're
Right.
not getting that money. Talk a little bit about what kind of money is in the race, and then, yeah, just talk about like where you're getting your money.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's a big money race. The state Senate seats, these are larger seats than state house.
Hmm.
And especially my opponent, very big into school privatization. He gets big money from PACs, like you alluded to. Especially this one guy named Jeffrey Yass, who is a billionaire, literally, and is the biggest funder of actually Republican Party candidates in Pennsylvania. But he's also my opponent,
Mm.
who is a Democrat, his biggest funder. He has a lot of PACs, this straight line connection to Betsy DeVos. He's also funded like voter suppression efforts in the state. So they're pouring big money into my opponent. Other PACs related to him are doing that. And on our end, we know we're not going to out fundraise someone like that. But I think we've been doing a great job. And like you said, we've gotten some union contributions, but honestly, not much. So we have over 1,400 unique donors. We've raised over $230,000, and like the median contribution is around $50.
Yeah.
So that just shows you like what is going into this. Some other organizations besides unions as well can contribute, but a lot of it is just grassroots fundraising. And yeah, I mean, I can't wait till we have publicly funded elections. I mean, it's especially now being on the other side, you see like literally that if we don't get this money, I can't have staff, I can't have a building, an office,
Right.
we can't have literature. So it really does power everything on this campaign. And of course, this is why the party just prefers people who can self-fund themselves. But
Right.
it really is telling. I mean, at our first campaign finance report, they put out a graph showing like our campaign literally has 7 times as many donors as my opponent, which just shows
Hmm.
he's relying on a few wealthy people
Yep.
writing big checks, and we have a much broader array of support. But yeah, the money factor unfortunately is just dominant. That's why
Yeah.
candidates spend hours every single day. People probably listening have gotten calls from me begging them for money. I apologize about that.
All right. Well, I wanted to ask a broader question too, which is why run for office, Paul? I mean, we all know on the show you are a public school teacher. You're very passionate about teaching and also passionate about being active in your teachers union. So why not stay a teacher or the host of a YouTube show? To be honest, what exactly is going on in your district that made you think I need to do this?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I mean, I kind of zoom out to answer that first. What makes this kind of ironic is I've just always been someone that has not been that active in electoral politics. I vote and stuff. I've always been someone, and even still believe that being in the labor movement is really the most important thing. My line, shop stewards are the most important position in this country. And I still believe that. I mean, but I definitely was inspired by candidates like Bernie and other local candidates that
Hmm.
show we can't ignore the electoral realm. And, realistically, if you think about other countries that have Labor Party, social democratic parties, socialist parties, as flawed as they might be, then, there's, I think, a more mature understanding that you need to have both. We can't ignore the state, and we need to get our people in the state in
Hmm.
different ways. And there should be kind of a virtuous cycle there, and that arena is important. And I think especially the right kind of candidates, if they can truly reflect like a labor coalition, we need to run those things. And I think especially looking at state legislatures are really important. And we know how important the federal level is, but it's at the state where you can fight austerity, where you can start to try to tax the rich,
Hmm.
create union jobs. There's a lot of revenue to work with. That's where a lot of our public education funding is dealt with, is at the state level. And these are seats that are not as overwhelming to try to contest for as Congress. So I think this is an area the left really should look at. And
Hmm.
so, it kind of just struck me at a certain point of thinking about this wave of left candidates we've had these last 5 and 6 years, and kind of thought what you alluded to earlier of like, it would be really nice if we can get more people straight out of the labor movement, people who could maybe start their campaign with that coalition. And it sounds, when you say it, it sounds very egotistical, but I kind of felt like, this kind of makes sense for me in this moment, especially and in specifically my district, some of the highest poverty levels,
Hmm.
poorest zip codes, some of the toughest issues with development that's displacing people, public school funding, all environmental issues. There's a big portion of the district that's on a floodplain, and that's been getting worse as climate change worsens. So there's definitely was a need, and specifically who has been in that seat for so long, one of the most conservative Democrats in the state legislature, which is really out of step with the district itself, which I think is fairly progressive in terms of the voters. Um, and who he's getting his money from, the fact that he's never had anyone primary him, it
Hmm.
literally got the seat handed to him. So I think all these dynamics had made sense that this person I think is vulnerable. We can mount a serious
Yeah.
challenge, and and do this in a way that's reflecting a movement. And I hope afterwards, when we win, is keeping this coalition together of labor, of progressives. After we win, to keep actually getting these things passed.
Speaking of state level legislation, gotta quickly shout out my own state, New Mexico. We recently got free
Right.
public college in New Mexico. So,
There you go.
things can definitely happen.
Right.
On that note, what are kind of some big pieces of legislation that if you were elected, you would want to see go forward?
Yeah. It's so hard to choose.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, the very basic one is the school funding.
yeah,
The legislation, what we call the fair funding formula, which would just more equally distribute education funds. And broadly speaking, taxing the rich.
yeah,
Pennsylvania, like many states, but we have a huge problem with the corporate tax loopholes. We're one of the largest natural gas producing states, and they don't even pay a dime in taxes. So really shifting the revenue question in the state has got to happen really for anything, I think, really to get actually passed.
yeah.
And broadly, and this is something that comes up on the Jacobin show I cover a lot, is the question of green jobs, green
Yeah.
union jobs. And I think, again, this is something that we can do a lot at the state level, even if at the federal level we can't get much done. And I've covered this a little bit, but we're seeing more and more states, Illinois, New York, Connecticut, Rhode Island now are starting to move towards doing this, and doing this with union support from the beginning. So I
Hmm.
think, that to me is really would be one of the biggest crowning achievements, is getting that coalition of labor together to hammer out, all the jobs we could create in transitioning to clean energy. There's really just no limit. Retrofitting buildings, expanding public transit, geothermal, wind, solar, nuclear. There's just all kinds of work that can be created, and other states are figuring it out of how to get this
Yeah.
together and start moving it forward. I think there's no reason Pennsylvania can't be next, and I think I'd be someone that's well positioned to kind of bring that coalition together. So I guess that wasn't a priority. I just listed off many things, but
They're
this is
all
where,
important.
yeah, this is where we I think got to be heading to, and
Yeah.
I'll mention another thing, and I've probably said this before. One of the most inspiring things to me about the Sanders campaign and the possibilities wasn't even just about, obviously he supports great legislation, but this
Right.
organizer in chief idea, and like, what would that actually look like for someone in there who's trying to stoke the flames and use their power and resources to help people organize. And there's so much that can be done with labor at the local level.
Hmm.
One example is that Amazon is actually coming. There's a fulfillment center coming to Southwest Philadelphia in my district. And we
Ah.
know now the Teamsters at the national level are looking at organizing Amazon. They're one of my strongest supporting unions. So playing a role in that fight, and that doesn't require necessarily passing legislation. Like if your party's in the minority, that's not an excuse to not do anything. So working with that union to try to organize Amazon, just like we're knocking doors now, we can knock doors of Amazon workers in the district,
Yeah.
telling them to join the union. When there is a strike breaking out, mobilizing constituents to support the strike, cracking down on union busting companies. There's a lot of resources you have as an elected official to do these
Hmm.
things. And I think that would be something I'd be extremely excited about. It's just like doing work in the district to support labor in a way that most elected officials are not going to do.
Yeah. All right, so that reminds me, I have just one last bonus question for you, and it's not about your campaign proper, but since you brought up labor organizing, and I don't have a chance to talk to Labor Paul as often as I did before, I got a question for you about the NLRB. So I feel like there are a lot of interesting changes going on at the NLRB, and I remember way back when you were my co-host, and Biden had just been elected, we were saying, there are obviously reasons to be skeptical of Biden, but at the end of the day, at least his NLRB appointees will be better than Trump's. I think that's borne out. What do you think?
Yeah.
And what's going on with labor law right now that's particularly exciting?
Yeah, I gotta say, I feel kind of validated. I had this very niche argument that I was harping on about how important the election. I would kind of half joke that I was a single issue voter for the NLRB, and I think it's kind of being borne out. It really does make a difference. We saw that recently the new general counsel, the head of the NLRB, put out an order wanting to ban captive audience meetings for companies. So I think if people don't know, this is where, companies are just allowed to essentially isolate workers, give them anti-union propaganda. So that would be a big deal if that is passed and that's actually enforced. They've come down with some rulings, I think, in the cases of Amazon and Starbucks organizing against the companies when they've broken the law, and things like that. So this is a really good sign for the future. And, always to be clear, it's not the labor law itself that's going to save us. And obviously, the Amazon victory, the workers themselves won that. Starbucks workers, that wouldn't happen without them. But, the NLRB can offer crucial decisions in decisive moments to help tip the scales in their favor and just create an overall favorable climate for workers to organize. We're not in the same moment, so I don't want to draw a parallel, but going back to the 1930s when unions exploded, again, it's hard to imagine that happening without a more supportive environment in the state for organizing. Again, it was up to the workers themselves, but having a supportive NLRB can go a long way. And right now, we're in this moment, workers feel emboldened. We've seen that for a while. Think back to Striketober. That was more about existing unionized workers striking, but I think more and more workers who are not in a union are emboldened. We're hearing a lot about all these different Amazon and Starbucks sites and probably other companies, people trying to file for a union election. So something is spreading, and the more that there's a supportive NLRB there, the greater chance of success. So I think that is a really good sign. And again, in itself is just an argument for you might as well go in the voting booth and just take 10 minutes to do that or mail in the ballot. It kind of does go a long way in this case.
Well, Paul, great to see you, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah, thank you.
If you like this video from The Jacobin Show, please hit like and subscribe and share with your friends. Thanks.